When people think about church security, they often think about responding to emergencies. But what if some crises could be prevented before they ever happen? I want to welcome you to the Faith Secure podcast, where we are watchful, prayerful, and prepared. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Brown, and I am absolutely delighted to have Dr. Marissa Randazzo on the podcast today. Dr. Randazzo is one of the nation's leading experts in behavioral threat assessment and violence prevention. Our conversation today focuses on prevention, warning signs, and how organizations, including churches, can strengthen preparedness through proactive observation and intervention before crisis occurs. I want to welcome Dr. Randazzo to the podcast. Welcome, ma'am.
It is a pleasure to be with you and delighted to have a chance to talk with you about this very important topic.
Absolutely. You want to dive right in, Doc?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. The first segment, I just want to, for the viewers, we're going to talk about understanding behavioral threat assessment. So the opening question I have for you, Doc, is for leaders unfamiliar with the term, what is behavioral threat assessment?
Sure. So in a nutshell, threat assessment is behavioral threat assessment is a fact-finding process. When someone has a concern about someone's behavior, they've seen something online, they've heard someone say something alarming or threatening. Behavioral threat assessment is the process we use to gather more information and make an objective determination, an objective assessment, and say, is there something here? Is someone serious about this threatening joke, this disturbing social media post? Do we need to take action to intervene? Let me give a quick history lesson here. So threat assessment as a practice was first developed by the U.S. Secret Service to look at people who are threatening to kill the president and other world leaders. And it was also developed around the same time by the Los Angeles Police Department, who were looking at threats to celebrities. It has been informed by decades of research. And so it's now used not only to protect people who are sort of public officials or public figures, but also to help with security in K-12 schools, in colleges and universities, in communities, and for houses of worship as well.
Okay. So now, thank you for that explanation, by the way. Now, I just have a question. How is that threat assessment different from profiling?
So it is actually almost the opposite of profiling. Let me try to explain this quickly. So profiling, we hear about where, there's a lot of TV shows and movies around profilers and people who are looking at investigating crimes or predicting future behavior. From the research standpoint, we have tried, my colleagues and I and other people studying violent behavior have tried for decades to figure out, is there some profile? Meaning, can we tell anything by looking at someone from the outside, at their age range, their sociodemographics, their racial identification, their functioning within the job or school or the community, anything we can look at outside at their characteristics or traits to say we need to be more concerned and rule out people who don't match that. That does not, profiling does not work for predicting future violent behavior. The short answer for those of you who are kind of movie and TV buffs is that profiling is really good. It's a good investigative tool when a crime has already occurred, but you don't know who did it. It is no good for looking at someone and saying, what will they do in the future? What will this person do? Are they going to be violent or not? So instead of looking at someone's outward characteristics or traits, behavioral threat assessment looks at what they are doing and what they are saying. It looks at their behavior and gathering information from other people as well about what they've observed to see if they're on, the term we use in the field is a pathway to violence. So let me explain super fast. Behavioral threat assessment is based on decades of research on targeted attacks, workplace shootings, mass violence at houses of worship and in K-12 schools against targeted individuals. We've seen this common pattern. among all of these incidents, where the people who carry them out typically follow a detectable progression of behavior beforehand. They come up with an idea, they develop a plan, they build the capacity or prepare so they get access to lethal weapons, and then they carry out their plan.
Right.
So in a nutshell, behavioral threat assessment is about seeing, is this person we're worried about on that pathway to violence? And if so, why? What can we do to get them off that pathway and onto a better path?
Okay, so let me ask you this. That was very, very well broken down too, by the way. But what are some common misconceptions about threat assessment?
Common misconceptions about threat assessment, and also misconceptions about this type of violence, is that people often think it's not preventable. It is preventable. I would never say we can prevent every act of it, but we can do a whole lot more to prevent. Often, another misconception is that people who carry out this type of violence are what we might characterize or label as a psychopath or sociopath. People who are intent at carrying out violence, who don't care about the repercussions, who don't have any empathy. That's a myth. The people who carry out acts of violence in houses of worship and elsewhere typically do so when they themselves are at a point of personal crisis. So behavioral threat assessment looks to see, hey, can we identify that crisis beforehand and actually help that person, work with that person to help them navigate whatever challenges or crisis they're facing, and help them, again, away from thinking about violence as a solution or hate as a solution, and help get them connected to support and looking toward a hopeful future. The other misconception and myth that we hear about behavioral threat assessment is that there has to be a threat. This is a common misconception, and if I had if I could do it over, we would rename this process, because threat assessment is misleading as a name. It is a process built to look at any alarming behavior. If you're worried about someone talking about not being around any further, if they're saying, I feel so despondent and helpless, and I'm blaming this synagogue, this mosque for my troubles, I'm blaming this religion for my troubles, I'm blaming this person for my troubles.
Right.
There's so much we can do to help and to look into those situations, but that we don't. This is largely about what can we do to help someone in distress. These acts are typically not carried out by someone that we'd label with that psychopath or sociopath type of terminology.
Okay. Well, now that we understand that threat assessment is focused on behaviors, I want to go in the next segment and deal with warning signs and concerning behaviors. And the question I have for you are there often warning signs before violence or crisis occurs?
There are, and I shy away a little bit from calling them warning signs, only because when people often want, tell me the list of warning signs. And then when we do that, they'll often be like, okay, well, but my spouse has 7 of the 10, or, my coworkers have that. And then they start let me tell you about what behaviors often precede this type of violence, and also behaviors that should prompt some alert or report to someone. So the behaviors that often precede this, I talked about this pathway to violence that these people often carry out, they think about, plan for, they prepare for, and then they carry out this attack. What we often see is that there is a lot of what the FBI calls leakage. People who are considering engaging in violence don't keep this a secret by and large. They usually tell other people. It may be directly, it may be through notes, it may be through an online blog, it may be through social media posts, but they are broadcasting their attack. And the work that I've done in this field, I often look at this as this is a cry for help. They're not keeping this a secret, in part because they want someone to stop them. They may not know how to stop themselves. They may not trust their ability to stop themselves. They may feel like they have no other option left, but they want someone to stop. So this leakage is really helpful. If someone sees something troubling online, hears it in person, overhears it, this is exactly the type of information to bring to, whether it's church security local law enforcement, a safety team within a religious organization of some. But essentially, if you are worried about how someone's doing, if you're worried about their level of distress, if you're worried about their increasing anger or animosity directed at a cause or at a person, if you are worried about their sort of increasing grievance, if they feel like that someone or something is to blame for their current lot in life, even if you were like, maybe I'm misunderstanding, maybe I don't want to get this person into trouble, it is far better to alert someone to your concern, a safety team, local law enforcement, a mental health professional, so that they can look into it rather than just rather than doing nothing about it. And the message I try to emphasize is that you may have that one missing piece of the puzzle that no one else knows. If you are worried about your own safety or someone else's safety, bring it forward. Tell somebody so that they can look into this further.
Yes. On that same vein, how should churches think about concerning behavior compassionately and responsibly?
Churches have a challenge, but also a real opportunity. So that churches, I think, and in the sort of church security work I've done over the past couple of decades, the one of the things I love about working with churches to advise them on this issue is that they are built to support and to welcome. And that is one of the best assets or factors you can have in approaching this work, because the way prevention works here is actually pulling someone in closer and working with them and helping them navigate a challenging situation, helping find a solution to that level of distress. Churches and houses of worship do this so well. But the challenge can be, I don't want to get someone into trouble. I don't want to label someone. I don't want to profile someone. What I try to do is explain, look, if you're worried about someone's behavior, what they're doing and saying, you can talk with them more about it, but also don't just do that. Also tell someone else so that together you can look into this. Or if there is a safety team available at a church, for example, that they can look into this more and look into what else is going on. What can we learn in talking with your law enforcement liaison? Maybe they've had a number of domestic calls to that person's home address and they've been worried as well. Maybe they're and so within church security, especially, there are things that can be built up and relationships that you can establish now so that if you become aware of a concern, you can call upon those relationships. So having a liaison with not just the local law enforcement department, but a person or investigator within that department. And then also establishing a liaison with a local mental health resource. So some communities have a community mental health center. Some communities have a mobile mental health unit. You can find out just based on your municipality what's local to you and start a conversation with them around, if we are concerned about some behavior, how can we work with you all to get help to our parishioner, the member of our community, or someone who just finds us because we're a house of worship and feels like we're a safe place for them. Behavioral threat assessment at its core is about support rather than punishment, rather than arrest. The reality is law enforcement can often do very little when someone hasn't actually done something truly bad. If they've threatened, we see prosecutors all the time say, not worth us pursuing this case. What you want is to work with law enforcement and say, okay, how can we get ahead of the curve here? The terminology in law enforcement or security that we often hear is left of bang. How can we get ahead of a problem and prevent that harmful thing from happening? So who can we work with you in our department if we've got concerns? And they should have someone available to you to work with.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I'll ask you on a practical vein, what are some examples of behaviors that should prompt further attention?
So anytime someone is talking about not being around anymore, often the things we hear about when we're worried about possible suicide or self-harm. if they feel like they have fewer and fewer options left, if they if they say something veiled like, you just watch, I'm going to make a name for myself, but it doesn't sound like I'm going to make a name for myself because I win American Idol or because I get that job. It's sort of a menacing, like, look, they'll see, I'll have the last word on this. If you are seeing things that they are posting online that have obviously a concerning bent to them, they're posting about weapons, they're posting about, possible targets, they're saying something that may be a direct threat or a veiled threat, a sort of an indirect threat. Anything like that should be alerted. But also, it can be very helpful, not just in thinking about these are people that your community may have some observation on. Mm-hmm. The other things to be doing are some some internet searching on your own to say, hey, is anyone out there talking about our particular church or house of worship? Is anyone mentioning our community? And this is where talking with local law enforcement can be very helpful to say, can you just keep us apprised? Absolutely. If you encounter something in our community, we may not know this person, we may never have seen this person, but if they're talking about us, we'd like a chance to say, hey, can we enhance our sort of vigilance around, if this person does show up at our church, who do we call? They don't have a connection to us. Right. You now know that they are angry at us, or they're blaming our denomination, and we are the local house of worship for that denomination. So help us to get ahead of this. And so connection and relationships are really important foundational pieces for churches to put in place, along with if we see some behavior. Now, the other behavior I would say is that if all of a sudden you've got someone who's showing up outside your church in your parking lot that you see multiple times, they don't come in, but they seem to be in the area around, you haven't seen them before, but now you see them multiple times. Right. That's something that should be reported to local law enforcement, because that's someone who might be surveilling your church or your house of worship to develop some information. So any odd behavior is fair game to report, and trust me, you're not going to get someone immediately into trouble by alerting the police that you've got suspicious behavior. But essentially, that's what you want to report: is we've got some suspicious behavior. Maybe it's innocuous. Maybe this person is incredibly shy or socially awkward and considering coming in, but they fearful. If that's the case, they're not going to get arrested. The police have plenty to do. They're not going to pursue something that's not. But if they are there for some ill intent, you have now given the police something to watch out for. I will add one other thing. Especially for smaller churches on budgets, I am a huge fan of video doorbells, but also like the ring doorbell, for example. But even without a doorbell, those vendors have easy to install motion detector lights and cameras. It can help just have an easy to access eyes and ears for your church to be able to look at. We can come, hey, we got motion detection at 3 a.m. Let's pull up the app and see who was there. This looks like the same person who was there last week at 3 a.m. I wonder what's going on. And so you can quickly get that video to law enforcement. They can say, oh, we know who that person is, or no, but we'll look into it. So it is a relatively low cost way to have those eyes and ears, and a way to look and see, is there someone looking at your facility in a way that it raises concern for you?
Absolutely. And I want to zero in on churches in this next segment. And you've touched on this already, but I just believe in the power of reinforcement. Okay, we're going to talk about churches and leadership and prevention culture. So, what unique challenges do churches face when addressing concerning behavior? As I said, you touched on it earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate.
So one of the challenges that I see is, unlike a workplace or even other community-based entities, churches often don't have dedicated security. And many don't even have like what we would call a safety team. So one of the things that can be really helpful is for church leaders to start to get up to speed on how to even think from a security standpoint. And thinking from a security standpoint really can be about how do we just get more eyes and ears on our people and on people who might have a direction of interest, is what we call it, on our church, on our house of worship.
Right.
There's a great resource put out by CISA, CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I always, it's misleading because the first name and the title of this agency is cybersecurity. So people think it's but it's also about infrastructure security. And they have some great resources for houses of worship, and you're probably familiar with them. But they're really, they're easy to read, they're straightforward, they're holistic around how to start to think about how do you get, maybe you can ask local law enforcement to do a walkthrough of your physical property and say, hey, those bushes obscure, let's pare back some of these bushes. Let's add some lighting over here. So you've got more visibility and people can't necessarily hide. You can see if people are coming. But they can also work with your local law enforcement, and this CISA guide, CISA, can be helpful tools for church leadership to get to start to think around security. And especially for behavioral threat assessment, it is not about distancing. And I think this is where church leadership often misunderstands how they can be partners in and leaders in security for their own organization. Security is largely about fostering connections and relationship with these local agencies, with the people whose behavior might be scaring you. It actually is around how can we lean in and learn more. That is one of the fastest ways toward prevention when we're dealing with someone in distress, is connecting with them further. You may be the first person, a church leader or a church staff member, may be the first person to actually show up and listen to this person in a long time. And listening and having a conversation is a powerful de-escalation tool. It is a powerful protective tool. So churches already do this so well. And it's just a matter of adding to church leaders' awareness that I can use my skills as someone who connects well with people, but to also use that opportunity to say, is this someone in distress? Do I need to add a mental health agency here? Do I need to help get this person to the hospital? Do I need to call law enforcement? Because what you can provide what they need might be beyond what that church can provide. So it's a matter of adding to leadership's awareness, not changing how they do these, but really pulling upon the skills and resources they already do well to also use those for a security mindset at the same time.
Okay. I want to stay on that path, Doc. So tell us, what does a healthy prevention culture look like inside the church?
Healthy prevention culture actually is a culture where people are caring about each other and will act earlier than not out of care. And so a healthy security culture and essentially has a couple of components. One is a climate where people feel like they can bring something forward. So no matter your role within the church, you might be a congregant, you might be someone who's there to clean the facilities after service, you might be someone who's there in a support role, like an administrative assistant, you might be a church leader. No matter the role, the messaging should be, if you see something concerning, something that worries you, please bring it forward so we have a chance to look into this. So it's this sort of see something, say something, do something mindset that we see in airports, for example. But to say that message is about caring. It's not about getting someone into trouble. It's about caring for your own safety, the church's safety, the safety of that person who's scaring people. So if you're worried about safety because of, whether it's your own safety, the congregation's safety, that one person's safety, bring it forward so we can look into it. And that it's not about tattling. You're not doing it to get someone into trouble. You're doing it to help. So that mindset is helpful to try to broadcast. The other component, as I said, is sort of a positive climate, meaning that finding ways to make sure that people feel if they bring a concern forward, it's going to be treated fairly. Now, schools do a great job at evaluating their climate, and churches can use this model. doing a survey of congregants, a survey of staff to say, kind of how safe does this place feel? Do you feel respected? Do you feel if you brought something forward, it would be treated fairly? Do you feel like it would be treated the same as if a church leader brought it forward? How are there things that we can do to improve the climate? Because churches are organizations built with humans just like anyone else. And so there's going to be some that do this work better than others. Well, my recommendation is if you do sort of a climate survey, and again, you can look at school climate surveys and modify them for your church or your house of worship. If you do a climate survey to feel how this place feels to people, do they feel respected and connected, et cetera, then it's really important to make the results public to your congregation and not keep them quiet. Organizations that have done climate surveys and they've said, these results don't look good. They don't make us look good. So let's just keep them quiet. That is a fast track to mistrust. So be honest and be transparent. Hey, we thought this place felt more welcoming than it did. There are certain groups or people generally. So as a church, what can we do? And open it up to ideas from everybody. What can we do to make this place feel more welcoming, feel more connected, feel safer, etc.? So it's a great tool to do. You can do it once every other year, once a year, once every 5 years, whatever the organization may want to do. But be transparent about the results, however ugly they might be, and then make it a group effort. Hey, we welcome any and all ideas about how to improve in this area. So those are important. The other sort of core components about church security and behavioral threat assessment is develop a safety team. So if you don't have a safety team, look at who you might have, and you may well pull upon expertise from within your congregation rather than necessarily church leadership. You will have people within your population who have current or prior experience in this area. And oftentimes, especially retired law enforcement, retired threat assessors, we want to help. And so use us. And so it would be great to just do a call out to the entire congregation or parish, whoever it is, to say, we're looking to build a multidisciplinary security team, a safety team. We would love to have someone who's got a security background or law enforcement, someone with a mental health background or mental health license, someone who someone, and sort of pull upon law enforcement, mental health, and then someone from church leadership. At a core, that should be your safety team. But you can involve others, people who've got relationships with community-based agencies, all of those, to say who's available to help. Let's build this together and look at how we can improve our climate, how we can encourage people to report concerns to us early. Create an email address, create a chat address, anything like that, so anyone can then report a concern early. Your safety group can look at it and start to gather more information and figure out, do we need to do a full assessment? Do we need to involve local law enforcement or mental health? Do we need to work directly with this person? What do we need to do here?
Okay, that's good. You actually took care of like the next 3 questions I had. So we're doing pretty good, Doc. We're doing pretty good. I don't know how to answer. I love it. I love it. I don't know how to answer succinctly. No, you're listen, Doc, you're dropping nuggets. It's all good. No problem. Excellent. So what is 2 things I like to do on every episode, Doc. Yeah. One, I like to do a scenario and then ask a couple of follow-ups, and then I like to ask a reflection question. So we're going to go right into the scenario, okay? I'm going to give you a scenario and then ask 1 or 2 follow-up questions, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, here's the scenario. A church volunteer notices increasingly concerning behavior from an individual attending services regularly. Mm-hmm. Staff members disagree on whether the behavior is serious or simply unusual. So now, how should leaders approach uncertainty in this situation?
I think it is better to approach with care. And if you don't feel safe approaching, then alert someone that, hey, this may be nothing, but it seemed out of the ordinary, or
Right.
I was worried, or it was unusual, or I'm worried for their well-being. You can frame it as I'm worried for this person's well-being, not I'm trying to get them into trouble. So if people feel comfortable,
Right.
if there's
Right.
someone who feels comfortable approaching that person to say, hey, how are things going? Let's try to do some more engagement. That can be incredibly helpful, but it is absolutely fine if there isn't someone you can call upon who feels safe having that conversation to alert church
Okay.
leadership, local law enforcement, say, hey, this may be nothing, but in this day and age, I was worried. Is this anything here? Can you all look into it for us?
Okay, that makes sense. So this just begs this question. So now I know a balance has to be struck, but how do organizations or churches avoid both overreaction and underreaction?
Yeah. So avoiding overreaction, the overreaction, there's not that much I'd say what I don't want you to do is jump right to barring someone from your church if you don't need it. Like you don't need to jump right to something sort of distancing, someone that would create distance. You can say, hey, right now we're not comfortable having you in this service, but I would love to have another conversation with you, for example. So that's the sort of risk of overreaction. What I've seen is churches are much more at risk of underreaction because they don't want to profile someone, get them into trouble. However, I would say tell anyone who might be in a position to see something, look, even if you have to say, hey, this may be nothing, I may be completely wrong, we want to hear about it. And if you don't want to call law enforcement, that's fine, but tell church leadership. And our safety team, our newly formed safety team, can make the determination about what to call. And we have people who have all sorts of predispositions, conditions that may explain why their behavior seems different or odd or even scary.
That's true. That's a great point.
Right. But I'd rather have the person who notices something worrisome say, hey, I am worried. And it may be nothing, and have your safety team. So, that's actually someone who's got a known neurodivergent or neurodiverse condition. And that's why they come across as different to us. But thank you for letting us know. So I'd rather people report, and if they feel better, report up to church leadership or create a safety team so that they're reporting internally. And then the safety team says, yeah, now we need to alert local law enforcement to see, did they know something else? Do we need to take any action?
Right. And they make the call.
Exactly.
Yes,
right.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. So now we're going to go to the closing segment, and this is the reflection question, Doc.
Yep.
Okay. So now, what encouragement would you give church leaders who want to improve prevention awareness, but they feel overwhelmed about where to begin?
Yeah. So I would say first stop is to read that CISA.gov resource. And I don't think I have the the link with me, but I can send it to you that you could distribute separately, or you could put it in notes for the show. But there is this free guide for church leaders on church security, including behavioral threat assessment concerns. So I would say first and foremost, as an action plan, read through that resource to educate yourself as a church leader or a church safety team, and then talk with local law enforcement around what should we be doing. Can you help us do some physical security assessments? Can you help us get more visibility about people who might want to do us harm? And work with, say, who can be our point of contact. So you're not calling 911. I mean, you're calling 911 if there's an emergency, but you're not calling dispatch and trying to explain, I'd like to talk to an investigator, et cetera. Do this at a time where there isn't an urgent situation, or find out maybe there's someone within local law enforcement who's already part of your community or part of your congregation. You can put the word out through a newsletter to say, we're looking to build a safety team, so help us do that. And then the messaging from that safety team or church leadership should be really around empowerment, that it doesn't matter how short or long you've been part of that church community. It doesn't matter what role you have. You might be cleaning the bathrooms. You might be the church, you might be an elder in the church. But doesn't matter how long or what position, you may be the first person to see something troublesome or something that worries you. If so, please let us know so that we can look into this further and figure out how to help. Put that framework on, figure out how to help so that people don't think, this is my good friend, I don't want to report them because they might get into trouble.
Right.
Behavioral threat assessment is about looking to see, are they in crisis? How best can we help? And so you're putting that framework on. We'd rather hear about it because there may be something we can do to help. So.
All right. Oh, Doc, you dropping knowledge. I appreciate it. Just hang out 1 second while I close out, okay? Just hang out with me.
Absolutely.
Viewers, I just want to speak to you. Preparedness is not only about responding well during crisis, it's also about awareness, communication, leadership, and recognizing concerns before the situations escalate. And that responsibility belongs to all of us. I want to thank you, Dr. Randazzo, for being a guest on the Faith Secure podcast. You dropped great information.
It was my pleasure.
You did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for tolerating my very long answers.
Oh, no problem. I mean, it was good information, ma'am. Thank you. And I also want to thank you, the viewers. If you want more information on this or any other church security related matter, please go to mdbconsultingagency.com/Faith Secure, and you can book a free 30-minute church security consultation. Until the next episode, remember to be watchful, prayerful, and prepared. God bless.